Okay, so let's begin. All right, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the Team Up Together Expanding Expertise, Championing Excellence and Leadership, also known as TUT Excel. Uh, Thank you for joining us for this proposal information webinar. I'm Arlene Modesti Knowles, the Team Up Together Associate Director based at the American Institute of Physics, one of the Team Up Together lead partners organizations, and I'll be facilitating the webinar this afternoon. I'm joined by my colleague, Morgan Harding.
Hi everyone. My name is Morgan and I'm also a program coordinator for Team Up Together. Glad to see you all here.
Excellent. And we're being supported on today's call by our colleagues Amy and Leslie from Amplify Philanthropy. So today's session is designed to help prospective applicants better understand the goals of the Team Up Together Excel program, what makes a competitive proposal, and how they might design projects that will meaningfully impact student outcomes. We recognize that departments are all at different stages in this work, and our goal today is to provide some clarity, some guidance, and practical insight into what reviewers will be looking for. That happens all the time. Before getting started, I want to just provide some brief context around about AIP, the American Institute of Physics, and its role within the physical sciences community, and how Team Up Together is situated in the community as well. So AIP, where Morgan and I are located, is both a federation representing the 10-member society. I'm sorry, the 10-member physical science societies, as well as 25 affiliate organizations that share aligned missions with AIP. It's also an institute and center of excellence supporting the broader physical sciences ecosystem. Team Up Together represents a collaborative effort across AIP. Three of our member societies, including the American Association of Physics Teachers, the American Astronomical Society, and the American Physical Society, and the Society of Physics Students, all of us committed to improving student success in physics and astronomy. In this session, I will provide some background and contextual information on Team Up Together, and then we'll get into the Team Up Together Excel program and the proposal process. I'll provide some practical proposal guidance on what reviewers are looking for, and then you'll have a chance to ask your questions. Before we get into that, just a few housekeeping rules. If you have questions throughout the presentation, please type those into the Q&A. If you have questions about your specific program, please send an email to info@teamuptogether.org and we can discuss it individually. Also note that this session is being recorded and will be available after the session. However, we will stop the recording before the Q&A so that people can feel free to ask their questions. So the Team Up Together program is grounded in the findings of an AIP task force report entitled "The Time Is Now: Systemic Changes to Increase African Americans with Bachelor's Degrees in Physics and Astronomy," which we call the Team Up Report, and which you can read online for free, and I highly encourage you to do so. The report focuses on systemic barriers affecting African American students in physics and astronomy and offers recommendations for supporting African American students, but all students benefit from these interventions. Therefore, Team Up Together takes an expanded view of these recommendations for improving student outcomes. Now, in the study, we uncovered 5 factors that contribute to the persistence of the students in these fields, and they are a sense of belonging, which lets students know that they are welcomed and valued in their departments and in their major. A strong physics identity, where they perceive themselves as future physicists or astronomers, and which can be built through encouragement by faculty and success as they engage in the activities of the profession, such as research and problem solving. Specific academic support that emphasizes good teaching methods and supports the view that students are, in fact, capable of being successful in these fields. There's personal support that acknowledges that students may be facing extreme financial burdens as well as other stressors that impact their ability to pursue and persist in these fields, and that providing support to help overcome these stresses is important. And then, of course, leadership and structures, which prioritizes the student's success and all of the other factors. So the report also notes that unsupportive environments in physics and astronomy departments faced by some students can be mitigated by departments addressing systemic and cultural issues and with attention to these five key factors. So, as you design your proposal projects, think critically about student experiences, departmental culture, and how you're addressing the five factors in ways that will likely improve your undergraduate students' outcomes. Then be sure to describe these in your proposal. So as mentioned, Team Up Together expands on the Team Up report. It's a collective action initiative led by AAPT, AAS, APS, AIP, and SPS, with a mission to catalyze structural and cultural change in physics and astronomy to significantly improve graduation outcomes for undergraduates who face the starkest barriers to success in these fields, including a focus on African American students. Yes, I know that's a mouthful. Um, but in other words, we want to do our part to improve the educational experiences and outcomes of physics and astronomy students, where all students, including those who have faced the starkest systemic barriers, can thrive in these programs, earn their bachelor's degrees, and be fully prepared for their next steps, whether it be grad school, a STEM job, or another path that having gained the structure and critical thinking skills that a scientific education provides. So we carry out this mission with two main focal areas: direct funding and programming for students, and funding and support to physics and astronomy departments who want to partner with us on systemic change efforts that positively impact undergraduates facing the starkest barriers in these fields. Because as we know, talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. Within the broader ecosystem of Team Up Together, there are several programs and activities besides Team Up Together Excel. And these are a few of them that might be of interest to you and your students. So Team Up Together has a scholarship for undergraduate physics and astronomy majors facing the starkest barriers, which has an application in the spring. We have concluded our application period for 2026, but we will open back up in 2027. We have a new turf program for students to conduct paid research with a research mentor of their choosing. And the program pays a stipend to the student as well as to the research mentor. Application will again open this summer. It's a brand new program. We will have a discussion forum. We have a discussion forum for our students currently, but we will open up a discussion forum for Team Up Together Excel grantees to allow them to continue to interact with one another, share best practices, and share information about their projects. And then each year we have a workshop at the not each year. We have a workshop this year at the AAPT summer meeting for current Team Up Together Excel grantees, again, for information sharing and best practices and a learning opportunity for them. And then each year we have a professional development conference for our Team Up Together students, where faculty and professionals share career information and experiences with the students, and they have a chance to make lasting connections with the professionals and their peers. And this will occur this September in Washington, D.C. Okay, so now let's talk about Team Up Together Excel Grant Program. So in 2023, we launched the pilot Team Up Together Excel program, which offers 2-year grants of up to $200,000 to physics and astronomy departments, which we know are the lifeblood of these fields. The grants are for systemic change initiatives that A, align with our mission to improve educational experiences and outcomes for undergraduates facing the starkest barriers to success in physics and astronomy, including African American students. B, that address the Team Up 5 factors, And C, lead to a culture and practice of inclusion and support. Let me emphasize that the program supports departments committed to improving student outcomes through intentional, structural, and cultural change. And the culture part of it is important. Culture can be seen in your outcomes, and your outcomes can be measured by data. So it's important to take a good look at what's happening in your department to address the culture. Um, in a in addition, hold on. Sorry about that. Here are some of our grantees. This is our 2023 Team Together Excel grantees, our 24 Excel grantees. We have six in 24, sorry, and 25. So some of you may have seen the 23 and 24. Last year, we selected these seven institutions for the grant. And you'll notice how diverse the institutions are in size and classifications, in location, and in student body. In fact, I think with UC Davis, we have finally gotten to the West Coast. So we are all over the country. And so it's really great. But the point there is that there's no single type of institution that we're looking for and no single correct model for success. It really is dependent on what's happening in your local community, in your department, in your institution. These are some of the programs that the current Excel grantees have proposed and are working on. The range of funded activities include curricular redesign, strengthening mentoring, tutoring, and leadership building, creating transfer pathways from two-year colleges to four-year colleges, for example, building undergraduate research capabilities, building partnerships to benefit students, infrastructure improvements, and more. Many of the successful projects are combining academic support with activities that strengthen belonging and physics identity, but it's truly dependent on what the unique needs are in your department. Now on to the application and some guidance on that. So the grant offers an opportunity for departments who are applying to either scale up existing efforts that have proven to be successful in enhancing access and opportunity for physics and astronomy majors, to launch new initiatives that will achieve these goals and improve physics and astronomy undergraduate outcomes, or that will address gaps in infrastructure that directly impede the advancement of physics or astronomy bachelor's degree earners. For example, an example of an infrastructure gap. One of our grantees created a tutoring center and makerspace with whiteboard tables and 3D printers that directly fixed an issue for their undergraduates. The problem was that they did not have a consistent, reliable place to get academic help, and it was determined that there was a need for that. Um, and they also didn't have a place where they could connect as physics students and support one another. So I actually had the pleasure of visiting and interviewing some of the students, and they directly credit um, this space that they now have as supporting them academically and helping them to embrace their physics identity as well as their sense of belonging in the field. Because now they had a place where they could work problems together. They knew that anytime they went into this center, they could get academic help. They were struggling with a problem. And then they started to interact with one another on a more professional versus personal um, uh, basis. So it really did directly impact those students. And so that's an example of an infrastructure gap that was there and has been solved from this grant. The second major objective is to create replicable models of success. We're deeply invested in sharing with the broader community the ideas, the strategies, the programs, and the activities that work to create a sense of belonging for students facing stark barriers and that increase graduation outcomes for those students. So the expectation is that the departments who are funded in this program share their successes and their challenges and lessons learned so that other departments can begin to adopt or adapt those programs to create their own systemic changes. Therefore, a dissemination plan to share the interventions selected and the lessons learned is a critical part of the proposal process and the Team Up Together program as a whole. Additionally, awarded departments are asked to participate in convenings and conversations about their work, as well as create a case statement about what does and doesn't work in the success model as part of their final report. So dissemination is critical. I want to share and make you aware of some important dates and facts about the awards. So there is a question period that is open currently. It ends on July 1st. General questions may be sent to info@teamuptogether.org, and we will answer them and upload them to the Q&A, the living Q&A document. So you can visit that periodically as you're putting your proposal together. Proposals are due on July 10th, and we will notify applicants of awards or awards contingent on modifications or clarifications on August 18th. And then we enter into the grant agreement signing period, where there's a period of back and forth. Once those grant agreements have been signed, we will distribute the funds by October 1st, which is much earlier than in previous years. In previous years, we um, distributed funds in December. But we have built in some additional time during the fall semester for setting up program infrastructure as a result of information received from our current grantees. So I would encourage applicants to begin institutional planning conversations early for two reasons. One, to design and propose a realistic program grounded in the knowledge of what it actually takes to implement the program. And two, to understand and take clear action to clear out any potential administrative hurdles before starting your program. So should you be selected, so this will allow you to maximize the award period by starting your program earlier. We have up to $1 million for this program, and the awards given will range from $100,000 to $200,000. Given that, we estimate about 5 to 6 awards. When you are doing your budget, please remember the budget should be realistic, clearly justified, and aligned with the project activities. Remember to also round the final budget amount to the nearest 10,000. So the proposal components. We provide a template with word counts and point values clearly stated for each section in order to promote equity within the proposal process. We understand that there are some institutions that have, departments that'll write grant proposals for them. And there are some in which the faculty are doing that in addition to all the other things that the faculty are required to do. And so we wanted to sort of even the playing field a bit. And so we created a template that has a set of questions for the grant application. The questions are prompts. They do not have to specifically be answered, but they should be addressed in your responses. Before starting the application, I highly encourage departments to do some deep reflection using data on the undergraduates who are and are not participating in the programs. And then to think about why that might be. Are there structural or cultural issues or barriers in your department that are negatively impacting students? And if so, what interventions, if integrated into your department, would alleviate those barriers and negative impacts? And so once you and your teams have done some reflection, then you should begin to start the application. Um, the project narrative components are worth 70 points. The budget is worth 20, and the letter of institutional commitment is worth 10. However, all the parts are required, and if they are missing, the proposal will not move forward. The background and needs section, it shows that you understand, supported by data, any existing systemic issues that might exist at your department that are preventing equitable student outcomes. So that's a reason to do that self-reflection or that reflection as a team early on. It allows you to also showcase your department's existing commitment to Team Up's recommendations and Team Up Excel objectives. So if you're already engaged in this work, you can mention it there in the background and needs. The project design describes the work that you intend to do explicitly address those issues and leads to systemic change. Please provide the necessary details to describe how your intended project or remedy would address your department's particular issues within the framework of the Team Up 5 factors. You do not have to hit every key factor, although of course that would be great, but we're not asking you to force correlation where one doesn't exist. Okay. You should include a timeline and mention any departmental resources that will contribute to the project, as well as any foreseen potential challenges and noting how you might meet those challenges. For the evaluation plan, we highly suggest that you use an external reviewer or an educational researcher, internal to your institution or external, to partner with you on the evaluation plan, particularly in the data collection. We have seen proposals where the uh, the PI themselves were going to survey students about the project that they created, um, and there's so many reasons not to do that. So please don't do that. We highly suggest that you use an external reviewer. And you can put some of that cost into the budget and into the project narrative. For the dissemination plan, we talked a little bit about that. Explain how you will share the information about the work that you're doing to inform other institutions or your own institution, and other faculty. Note that Team Up Together will provide some opportunities for you to do this, including the grantee departmental convenings, but also describe how this project will be sustained beyond the funding period. That is also very key. This is, up to 200,000 for a 2-year grant, but we're looking for systemic change. So how are you going to incorporate the changes that you've made for the long term, you know? Departmental capacity. That's pretty easy. Just describe the department's capacity to carry out the project and the program, um, human resources, etc. Institutional support, we suggest you describe your institutional support, including the faculty, the staff and administrator buy-in or participation, as well as commitment of resources needed to carry out the project. This will be scored along with the letter of institutional support. Um, from the chair, the letter should be from the chair, a dean, or an administrator affirming the institution's commitment backed by actual resources. Um, so with respect to that, please do not use the form letter that many NSF applications require. We're looking for a real letter from an administrator committing resources and support. In terms of faculty buy-in, we'd like to see that beyond the key personnel, if you have other faculty, how are they engaged in the project? Um, are they serving as research mentors if you're creating a research experience project, or are they doing something as tutors uh, or selecting learning assistants, for example? How is the rest of the department engaging with this project? It's really important for us to see that. Otherwise, it's just the key personnel who are working on it, and that doesn't lead to systemic change nor sustainability, both of which are important to this program. For the key personnel, just provide a brief bio for each. It doesn't have to be long. We're not looking for CVs. We're looking for, 1 or 2 paragraphs on how they're qualified for the role they're playing in the project, what their role and responsibilities will be with respect to the project. That's it. The budget is pretty straightforward as well. There is a second worksheet for the budget detail or the budget justification. Again, please make sure the budget justification and the budget request align and that all budget items are addressed in the budget justification document. Please also ensure that the budget is realistic for what it is that you're proposing. So again, I recommend paying attention to the prompt questions. Please provide us enough detail so that we know what it is you're proposing. We've actually had proposals sent in where we had no idea what, what the project was. And that's just a waste of your time and it's a waste of our time. So just please give us the information. Um, and overall, the proposal should support, a coherent overall narrative. So strong proposals are both responsive to departmental needs and to the Team Up Together's mission. Um, it is important for the applicants to understand if and why barriers exist within the department and how the proposed project addresses them. I mean, it really needs to align to the needs of the department and the institution, but be in line with Team Up Together's mission as well. Um, Additionally, recruitment, there are a lot of proposals that really focus on recruitment. For recruitment alone is not systemic change. We understand that recruiting students is important and it is fine to include a strategy for bringing students into the department. However, a recruitment project without a robust strategy for how those students will be supported within the framework of the five factors throughout their educational journey in the department will not be funded. So we want to know if you are recruiting students, how are you supporting the current students that are there? And how are you supporting these students that you're bringing in throughout their education? So innovation, when we talk about innovative design, we're talking about finding creative solutions to problems you've identified in your department. You might think of a completely new way to address a problem that's evident in your department, or you might be improving or enhancing an existing solution in ways that will create greater value, is more effective, or utilizes resources in a more efficient way. All of that is innovation to us. I think one way to foster innovation is to talk to different people about what's going on in your department, especially the students. While their ideas may not be completely feasible, I've talked with students a lot because they don't understand sort of the administrative burdens that faculty have to deal with. Um, there still might be a glimmer or a spark of something that you can iterate on to design a project. So it's important if you can to talk to your students about what's really going on in the department. I know as faculty, your perspective about what's going on in your department is important, and more often than not, it's correct. But your students or an outside observer might be able to offer a different perspective that provides a more comprehensive view of what is really going on so that you can hone in on the real issues that need to be addressed. And that might lead to a better, more innovative project that offers a more aligned solution. The webinar that we did in 2024, which is linked in the Living Q&A, has a section in it by my brilliant colleague, Tremaine Britton, on innovation. And I invite you to view it for a deeper understanding of what we mean by innovation. Her section in that video starts at about 18 minutes if you're interested in learning more about innovation. All right, we're almost at the home stretch. So avoiding some common mistakes. So not reflecting on whether your proposed program or activity is feasible, given capacity, resources, et cetera, in your institution or your department is a common mistake. Is it executable in the real world? So here's an example. Let's say that your entire project is contingent on your department acquiring a large, expensive piece of equipment, which would be purchased with grant funds and with which there'll be new research experiences for students, tutoring opportunities, leadership positions, outreach, etc. However, you've not done the research to find out the timeline for receiving the equipment once ordered, nor have you articulated how the program would move forward if there were significant delays. Your application, given that scenario, would be at great risk of not being funded because the project is not feasible without the equipment, and the likelihood is low of acquiring the equipment, getting it up and running, getting faculty trained on it, developing educational programs around it, and getting students engaged within the grant period. Now, if there was a feasible contingency plan that by itself addressed the Team Up Together mission and the five factors, but would be enhanced if everything worked out with the equipment, then that proposal could potentially be funded. So it's really thinking through how feasible a program is the way you've designed it. We've already talked about whether or not it would be data informed. We are asking all of the proposals to be data informed. However, you collect that data, it doesn't have to be intensive. But having an understanding backed by data of existing systemic issues within the department or the institution that affect the educational outcomes for physics and astronomy undergraduates, including African American students, is an important piece of this puzzle. Um, if you had no institutional support, so the faculty were not involved, as I mentioned earlier. You didn't have a strong letter of support from your leadership. Um, we've had a few applications from institutions that had a lot of faculty, but only one or two were involved in any capacity. It just doesn't lead itself to systemic change. And certainly if the administrators are not really bought into it either. And by administrator, I mean it could be the chair, it could be the dean. Um, it could be higher than that. Some programs have had provosts and such involved. So lack of student input or program success rests on student. So if you had no student input or the whole success of the program resides on the students, Team Up Together, the Team Up Study and Team Up Together really are both student-centered programs. We have been from the beginning and we continue to be. So it's expected that departments will include students in some way in the design of the project, whether it's just understanding from their perspective what's happening, or they're including students in a more formal way. That said, programs that base the entire success of their program on student labor will also not be reviewed favorably because um, it's important that faculty and institutions are as committed as possible. And students are transient. And so once those students are gone, the institutional memory of that program may be gone if it's not baked into the department. And so that would be problematic. So you'd have to make a case if you're going to make a student-run program. Unfocused design or not enough detail. We have had applications that proposed just way too many activities for the funding that was requested or for the faculty capacity. And they were kind of like throwing everything at the wall, hoping something would stick. That doesn't work. It makes us work hard to figure out what it is that you're actually trying to propose or what would be appropriate. Um, and we don't want to do that labor for you. So help us help you. Instead, propose one robust program that may have one or two significant components that'll bring about departmental or organizational change. Not addressing systemic or structural issues is definitely a mistake. You need to articulate how the proposed activities contribute to systemic changes that better support undergraduate students in the department, including a focus on African American students. Um, that lead to reduced attrition and increased degree attainment, and then articulate how the department will change as a result of your work. Budgets that only cover or support faculty salary will likely not review well, as it doesn't directly benefit students, nor does it address systemic change or sustainability. Um, if you were to propose a project that only covered faculty salary, you'd have to make a very strong case as to how that is going to create systemic change in your department and benefit students. Instead, we prefer to see some significant portion of the project to be supporting program activities that directly impact students. And of course, I've already covered the budget and budget justification have to align. So just want to remind you that we have some resources for you as you do your applications. We have the living Q&A document. If you have questions, as you're preparing your proposals, you can send us an email at info@teamuptogether.org. We'll take a look. If it's broadly applicable to all of the applicants, we will put it in the Q&A. If not, we'll interact with you directly. A recording of today's webinar will be linked in the Living Q&A, and we have previous webinars there as well. And as I mentioned, the 2024 webinar has a section on innovative project design that you can learn from. So we have those resources for you. And now I think we can take questions and stop the recording.